Okay, so welcome to getting started with Originality Check. I have prepared a bit of an agenda, but we can be flexible on this. So if you have any in-depth questions, if you have any case-by-case scenarios that you would like to discuss, I'm more than happy for you to share those. Otherwise, my proposal sort of like for the agenda today is going to be discussing the quick submit function. Then we're going to look at creating classes. Then we're going to look at how to add students to those classes, how to create assignments, and then in the last step we're going to be interpreting similarity reports together, talking about filters and exclusions and the general features of the similarity report. And towards the very end, we've got resources and support to discuss as well. In terms of the objectives for today's session, I would like you to understand the features and functions of Originality Check, which are available to you as instructors. I would also like you to be able to use Originality Check to identify plagiarism and mitigate that being a risk later on. And I, of course, would like you to be able to share those best practices that we're discussing and establishing today within your institution and help other instructors as well. Just before we go into the product, one last slide to just sort of like give you an idea of what the Similarity Report means. Every Similarity Report is checked against our database, which has 1.8 billion student papers in it, 99.3 billion web pages, which are active and archived ones, and 89 million published works. We do have a partnership with Wikipedia, which enables us to bulk download data, so we always have the most up-to-date content of Wikipedia on our database. And we also have the 69% of the top 10,000 journals, which have been selected by top research universities worldwide. In terms of the breadth of our content types, we've got books, journals, conference proceedings, preprints, patents, and student submissions. So that's just in regards to the database, but now we can switch into the product. If you have any specific questions or anything in particular that you would like to ask, please feel free to use the chat box to ask any questions, and I'd be happy to answer them. You can also unmute yourself and ask away at any stage. If I don't hear anything from you in terms of like the chat box or the microphone, I'm going to roll with the agenda that I've just explained. Okay. If there's anything in particular, though, please feel free to interact and let me know. In order to log into Turnitin Originality Check, you will have to go to turnitin.com. In my case, I actually have to go to a different website, so I'm just going to real quick show you how it would look like from your perspective. So if you go to turnitin.com, you would press login in the right corner here and log in with your email address and password, and then hit login here. If you've never logged in before, it might be worth checking whether you actually have an account, because you do need to be invited into the system in order to be able to log in, okay? Which might just mean that you have to reach out to your account administrator for them to set you up and give you access to an account. If you do have access to an account, you would have set up your account previously, following on from an invitation that you would have received via email, okay? But yeah, what we do is we go in with our email address and password. So I'm just going to put that in here, press login, and then we are in the system. Now, in my case, I am an administrator, so I do have to switch my role to be an instructor. So if you yourself are the administrator, that might apply to you as well, having to switch to instructor. And you can also actually pretend to be a student as well. So you can set yourself up to be a student and switch your role to be a student as well. Most of the time, I suppose you will be the instructor, but it's just something to be aware of, okay? Now, the very first thing on our agenda was the quick submit function. The quick submit function is a way of checking papers without having that paper associated to a student. So if you ever just need to check something for yourselves, this is where you would go. The quick submit function needs to be enabled on your account, which you will do in by going to your name at this top here, right? Go to your name, and then 3 down in the account settings, there's the Activate Quick Submit button. You do have to switch this to yes for the quick submit function to be available on your account. So just make sure that this is switched to yes, and at the bottom, hit submit. After you've done that, the quick submit function should be enabled on your account if it wasn't already. By default, it is switched off. So if you have not enabled it in the past, it will be switched off. If you do enable it now, you will then see that you have got this third tab at the top, which is now the quick submit function. Okay. If we click to quick submit, we can go ahead and select a different account if we are associated with multiple accounts. And then as you can see here with this particular account, I already have done submissions before. Okay, so I can see here all of my previous quick submissions, their similarity scores, the paper ID, and when I did this. If I want to go ahead and submit more to this option, I would go ahead and say submit. And then I have to customize my search. Customizing my search just means in that case that I will have to just tick the databases that I want to check against. Okay, so in this case, that's the internet, student papers, and periodicals, which is publications. Okay. Then I can change where I want to submit my papers to. This is basically where my paper that I'm uploading is going to be stored and saved. Saving it means that it is going to be available on the database, the Turnitin database, in the future, giving us the option to check against those papers in the future as well. So we have the option of the standard paper repository and no repository. If we choose no repository, we are not storing the paper on any database, and therefore it's not going to be available for future checks. If, however, we choose the standard paper repository, it means that we store it within the Turnitin global database, okay? Which means you and other institutions can check against those papers in the future because it is then part of the database. In the next step, we just say submit, and then we can already go ahead and start our upload. At the top, we can choose what type of upload we want to do. So currently I'm in the single file upload. If we choose this drop down here, it will give us the option for a multiple file upload, a cut and paste upload, and the zip file upload. With a multiple file upload, you basically just have the choice to be uploading more than one document. With a cut and paste upload, it is just raw text that you're pasting into the system. And the zip file upload is where you have a zip file that you submit directly into the system as the zip file. The most commonly used upload is the single file upload. So I'm going to be using that for the session. Okay. You then can go ahead and give the first name and last name of the author. That might be yourself, or it might be a student, or it might be someone else. You then have a submission title that you can give. So I'm just going to use J.U.S.T, as in like University, Jordan University of Science and Technology. And then over here, we can check what can actually be submitted. So if I click on what can I submit? I can see the file requirements that the files I submit to Turnitin need to have. So files need to be less than 100 MB. They need to have at least 20 words of text. They can't be longer than 800 pages, and they have to be one of those file types. So we've got Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, WordPerfect, PostScript, PDF, HTML, and so on and so forth. Yeah, Google Docs and plain text. These are all the file requirements that we need to have in order to check the files for similarity. We can then go ahead and choose from the computer, from the Dropbox, or from Google Drive for our upload. I'm going to go ahead and choose from the computer. And then over here, I've got all of my documents where I can just go ahead and choose my file, say open, and then I can go ahead and press upload. This is now uploading it and giving me a bit of a preview, which is just going to be here. One sec. There it is. So we have got our pages and our printer preview, and we can then go ahead and say confirm. This has now made the submission, and I can go ahead and submit another file, or I can go to the assignment inbox. Okay. I can see, Raid, you raised your hand.
Yes, until we get the results. I have a question about the customization. Can I have my own customization as my own default? As you know, every time quick submit actually was a good thing to bring by Turnitin. and it helps to avoid the complexity of making classes and assignments and so on. But the setting is a concern. If I miss something, I don't have what I really expect. So the customization, can it be made as my default, or there is no way till now?
No, unfortunately, there's no way of creating your own defaults in that sense. So every time you use the quick submit function, you will have to go through these settings. We are going to go into creating classes in a second.
Okay.
So you will learn more about creating classes, creating assignments. But in terms of the default settings, when using the quick submit function, there's no default settings that you can configure, unfortunately.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, do we have any other questions? No? Okay, right. So we have used the quick submit function. So now we have our title here. The similarity score is still pending because it is still processing, and I can see my paper ID, the date. I can download the originally submitted file, and once the score is there, I can click on the score to go into the similarity report. Okay. Just to real quickly show you what that would look like. If we click on the score, it opens up the similarity report like this. And there it is, and we can start using it. Okay. Right, so that's the quick submit function. If you have any questions in regards to the quick submit function, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'd be going into creating classes. Okay, so aside from the quick submit function, when using the system, I will have to create classes in order to use the system. I can, of course, use the quick submit function without classes, but if I want to use the system in association with students, I will have to create classes, because without the classes, we don't have students and we are unable to collaborate with students and other members of staff. Okay. So in order to create a class, we need to go to our dashboard of our account and hit add class. Okay. There's two different types of classes. There's standard and master class. We're going to discuss both of them, but I'm just going to start with the standard class first. So with the class, we need to give it a name. I'm just going to stick with just at this stage, yeah. And we need to give it an enrollment key. The enrollment key is not a password. So basically it can be just something like just 123. It can be your surname 123. It basically just is there so that students enroll into the correct class. So it's not a password. It's more of a bit like a easy PIN code. Okay. I always go for Turnitin 123. It doesn't need to be too elaborate. The subject areas we can choose for ourselves. However, it will just mean that this is for our own references, and there's no real consequences of selecting the different subject areas. Let's just go with engineering in this case, okay? Student level, I go ahead and decide what level my students are. In my case, I'm going to choose undergraduate. And then the class start date is the date that the class is being created. As you can see, I can't change the start date, okay? It's just always by default, the start date is always by default the day that we create the class. We then have a class end date that we can choose. By default, you can see here it is 1 year. If we, however, choose a different end date, we can just go into the calendar and put that further into the future, or we can choose a date closer to the current date, okay? It is quite important to select the real end date of the class, just because the students enrolled into that class will be deactivated from the class on the end date. And that's basically opening up space for new students to join your account. Okay. And then we hit submit. And we have now created a class. So as you can see here, I'm now given a class ID. And I'm told my enrollment key, okay? The class ID is allocated by Turnitin. The enrollment key is what we have created ourselves. This information can now be shared with the student in order for them to enroll into this class, okay? So please make sure you take a note of this. You say continue, and then you're basically done already. If you have missed the class ID, you can always find the class ID in this dashboard here, okay? So it's always there. together with the class name. You can also edit a class. So if you go to the little wheel in this over here, you can change all of these things that we have just created, okay? And you can also convert it to a master class should you have changed your mind. The topic of the master class, let's do that next. If we click Add Class, this time we're going to select Master. We're now creating a master class, which the only difference is between a standard and master class, that with a master class, I can add other instructors to the class in terms of I can work with one other person on this class. Unfortunately, the maximum amount of members of staff I can add to a masterclass is 1. So the maximum of members of staff working on one class in collaboration is 2. So it's going to be the person who sets up the masterclass and the person they add to that masterclass. So in the class type, we select master. We give it a master class name. I'm just going to stick with J.U.S.T again. We then have the subject area. Let's stick to engineering. And we also have our student level, which I'm going to choose undergraduate again. Start date, same as today, as always, because we're creating the class today. And then the class end date, we can go ahead and choose whichever date we want. And then we say submit. And it's now created this masterclass for me, giving me a class ID as well. I can't do much with this at this stage, so I'm just going to say continue. And then over here in my masterclass, you can see that I now can add a section. And in fact, I have to add a section to this masterclass in order to start using it. Okay, so we click on plus section, and then we have to give a TA's first name. The TA in that case is standing for teaching assistant, but it doesn't have to be a teaching assistant, of course. It can just be a colleague that you're collaborating with. Okay. In my case, I'm going to have to choose myself because I'm on my own on this account, but you can, of course, choose someone else that you're collaborating with. We put in their first name, last name, and email address, and then hit submit. In the next part, it's going to ask me for a section name or number. I'm just going to stick to J.U.S.T again. And then it's also asking me for an enrollment key, which I'm going to use Turnitin 123 again. Okay. I then say submit. And I'm now being told the class ID and the enrollment key. This, again, is the information that the students will use in order to enroll into a class, okay? So we say continue, and if we scroll down, you can see here that in my masterclass J.U.S.T, I now have a section called J.U.S.T where I can see who's assigned that masterclass or that master section, which is my colleague Divya Lorenz, and then I've got the ID here, okay? Now, with a masterclass and a masterclass section, I can always go ahead and edit these settings. So if I want to go ahead and edit the masterclass, I go to the little wheel and I can collapse it to a standard class. I can change the class end date, change the subject and the name and so on. What I can do as well, if I go to the section of the masterclass and edit that, I can go ahead and change the person I'm collaborating with. And if I hit submit, I can also change the section name and the enrollment key, okay? So that's how to set up a class, a standard class and a master class. Do you have any questions so far? Yeah, right.
Yes, thank you. For masterclass, will be the TA or the person who assigned by me have privilege to change settings or make or there will be restriction to that.
They have the option to edit the class settings, yeah. So they could go ahead and extend the end date, for example.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, I'd like to go to, if you let me, to the beginning of this session. You said that I can check my documents without going into classes or assignments by clicking on my name on the icon above on the beginning of at the top of the page. So I tried it when during your discussion, but I couldn't capture the idea. So would you please repeat it for me if possible?
So if you go to your name.
Yes, I did.
In
Next.
the account settings, you go
Yes.
to activate quick submit and select yes.
Okay.
You scroll down and hit submit.
Just a minute. So I can go down and yes.
And then you should see this tab at the top here that says quick submit.
Okay, submission, submit. Just a moment, please. I'm getting the same page. So after changing the what you get here?
So do you
After
see
clicking,
the,
yeah, quick submission
the tab?
the top.
You clicked on it, yeah?
Just a minute. Okay, it's now clear for me.
Okay, do you need the other steps as well?
No.
Okay.
I think it's okay.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you.
No worries. Do we have any other questions?
I have a question. I might have missed something, but you're given a class ID, you're given a class ID and then you're given like a code to enter, right?
No. So the class ID is created by the system. The code, the enrollment key, is created by yourself.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Okay, so in regards to the students, obviously we now need students to be in those classes with us in order to start using it in collaboration with students, okay? So if we go into a class or the section of a class, doesn't really matter, we can go ahead and go to the Students tab at the top of this page as soon as we clicked on the class, okay? If you click Students, you can go ahead and add students to the class. So by just pressing add student, you can type in their first name, last name, and email address and submit, and then that student is being added to the class. Okay, so let's do that together just real quick. I'm just once again adding myself, hit submit, and then this is the student added. Okay, now I can go ahead and do that for every individual student, or I can go ahead and upload a student's list. If I have an Excel spreadsheet of my students, that is the much quicker and more efficient way of doing this. The spreadsheet does need to look like this, where I've got the first name, last name, and email address in the different columns of my spreadsheet. I can then go ahead and choose that spreadsheet and hit upload list. All of the students on that spreadsheet will be added to the class. However, what I can do instead of adding them, I can actually ask them to create their own accounts, okay? That's actually the much quicker and efficient way for you. So the student would go to turnitin.com and they would click on create account if they don't already have an account, okay? So only if they are logging in for the first time, they've never used Turnitin before, that's when they would create an account. If they have already used it in the past, there's no need to create an account just because they are adding a new class, okay? So for the first time, they would click on create account, they would select student, and then they would provide the class ID that you give to the student, okay? So if you remember, that is, if we go back to our homepage, that is this number here, okay? So this class ID needs to be provided, it's either the section or the standard class. So this class ID we put in here, and then the enrollment key that you have set up yourself. So in my case, Turnitin 123. And then they provide their first name, their last name, how they want their name to be displayed as, the email address, they confirm the email address, they set a password, they select a secret question, and then there's the end user license agreement that they have to agree to, okay? Just before they do that, they also have to select that they're not a robot, and then they go ahead and create their profile. This is as easy as, for students, it's easier to just set them up, set themselves up, other than you having to set up all of the students, okay? Because the student is only setting up their own account, whereas you would be setting up everyone's account. So this is usually the most efficient way of asking students to get onto the product. If, however, they already are in the product, they already have an account, and you have created a new class that they just have to add to their classes, then what would happen is, I'm just going to switch my role to a student. they would go to enroll in a class. Okay, so they might already be enrolled into classes. So you can see here, I am enrolled into this class, which we enrolled myself in together. But if I need to be in another class, I go ahead and hit enroll in a class. And then I'm just being asked my class or section ID, and I'm being asked the enrollment key. And if I hit submit, I'm then enrolled into that new class as well. There's no limit on how many classes a student can be enrolled into. They would just have to make sure they enroll into all of the relevant classes, obviously provided with the information by their instructor. Okay. So that's basically the student enrollment and how to add students manually yourself, how to add them via list, and how they can create their own accounts and how they can enroll into further classes after that. Do you have any questions? Okay, that seems like we don't have questions. Okay, that's great. So the next step is after we have created our class and we have our students in the class, we now need to start by adding an assignment to the class. So in order for the students to submit anything to the software, we will always need to have assignments. Assignments we can set up in either the section of a masterclass or a standard class. We go to either the section or the standard class, and we see our dashboard here, yeah, which we already know because this is where we started adding students. From here, I just simply press add assignment, okay? So to add my assignment, I need to give it a title. I'm just going to stick with just again. We then have the option to either allow any file type or allow only those files that can be checked for similarity. Now, allowing any file type will allow the students to submit photographs, pictures, pretty much anything that cannot be checked for similarity, okay? Only certain files can be checked for similarity, which is PDF, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and they need to obviously hit those requirements that we discussed at the start of the session as well. So for example, they need to have at least 20 words of text. They need to have less than 800 pages. They need to be smaller than 100 MB. So I am basically restricting my students to just submit those files by selecting this top option, okay? If, however, your students are submitting photographs and you do want to allow that, then you can select allow any file type. Most of the time, though, it is best to choose this top option. We then, once again, choose where we want to submit our papers to. So where do we want our papers to be stored, okay? We have got the option to submit to the standard paper repository. That's the student global database, meaning you and other institutions will be able to check against those papers submitted to this assignment in the future. Or we can choose no repository, okay? No repository means it's not being stored, and therefore you and no other institution cannot check against those papers in the future. So if you want to make sure to double check whether students are maybe copying off each other, you would have to choose the standard paper repository. You then have the start date and the due date. So when are students supposed to be able to start this assignment, and when is this assignment due? Okay. You also have got times that you can select for that as well. We then have optional settings, and this is where we can configure the rest of the assignment. So here, for example, we can enter special instructions. So that could be just write 500 words on a certain topic, consider these different points, and so on and so forth. So you can give the students basically an assignment brief, okay? Then you can select whether you want to allow submissions after the due date. So once we have hit the due date, are students still allowed to submit although they have missed the due date, or do you want to prevent that from happening? So completely up to you. You can choose yes or no, okay? In the Similarity Report part, you can now select whether you want a Similarity Report generated for submissions or not. If you choose yes, you will receive a Similarity Report for every single submission, as long as it no, sorry, because we have selected only file types that can be checked for similarity, you will receive a similarity report for every single submission. You can, however, say no, which means that you are not going to receive a similarity report for the submissions made to the assignment. So of course, what I would recommend you do is select yes, okay? You then have the option to select whether students are supposed to see the similarity report or not. So, for example, you can say immediately, first report is final. That means that the students are making submissions to the assignment. And as soon as the similarity report is processed for their submission, they can see the similarity report and can start looking through the similarity report. However, this is the final similarity report. They're not going to be receiving an updated version of that similarity report. You then have the option for immediately can override reports until due date. So that means that the student can submit one submission. They can see the similarity report, and then if there's any changes that they need to make, they can actually resubmit their paper and receive another similarity report for that resubmission. This works immediately for the 3 first times of submission. However, after the 3rd submission, every similarity report is delayed by 24 hours. We then have on due date, which is the last option, and that basically means that the student can submit at any stage between the assignment start date and due date. However, they will only receive the similarity report on the due date. Okay, so even if they were to resubmit their paper, they're not going to be seeing any similarity report up until we hit the due date. What we would suggest you do is immediately and can override reports until due date, because that gives the students just the option to double check their papers before submitting their final submission. We then have the option to exclude certain parts of the similarity report, which, for example, is to exclude bibliographic materials. So if we want the bibliography to be excluded from similarity checking, we would choose yes. I would recommend you choose no, just because this filter is available in the similarity report itself, and it is quite important to double check the bibliography for similarity as well. The same goes for quotes. I can exclude quotes or I can choose not to. I would recommend to not exclude quotes. Quotes are anything in double quotation marks. So anything that the system detects to be in between double quotation marks will be excluded. But once again, this filter is available in the similarity report itself as well. We then have the option to exclude small sources. Once again, this filter is available in the similarity report, and we can choose yes or no. If I choose yes, I will have to select what my threshold is. So what do I consider a small source? Okay, that can be by word count. So for example, I can say anything that is less than 8 words, I want to be excluded. Or it can be by percentage. So for example, any source that is less than 1%. Now, bearing in mind, though, that this filter is available in the similarity report and you can always use it there, I would recommend to choose no. Okay. Allow students to see similarity report. So if we want students to submit to the assignment, but we actually don't want them to see the similarity report at all, we can choose no. Okay. However, we would always recommend that the students are able to see the similarity report, and that's why I would recommend you choose yes. You can then enable translated matching. So if a paper is being submitted in a language that is not English, you can enable translated matching, meaning that if there is any sources that could have been matched to the English translation of that source, it will detect the source for you, okay? So what I would recommend is to switch it on. Even if there is no translated matching in the paper, it's always good to have it enabled just to make sure and to double check. We then also have the option to exclude a certain template. So we can upload a template, which the template requirements can be found here. Or we can create a custom template. So if we know, for example, that the students are going to be responding to 5 set questions, those 5 questions are going to produce a similarity match for every single student in that assignment. So by entering those 5 questions in the assignment template here, we are not seeing those 5 questions highlighted as similarity, although everyone is using the same 5 questions and should have a match, okay? So if there is such things as workbooks that you're working with where students do respond to the same questions, then it would be worth saving that as a template here. Okay, and then very lastly, we have got our search options. So we have got the student paper repository, the internet, and the publications, okay? So by ticking these boxes, we are just making sure that we are checking against those 3 databases. So of course, what I would recommend you do is to tick all of them, because the better your similarity report is going to be. With these settings, you are able to save your settings as default for future assignments. So once you have gone through these settings once and you have decided what works best for you, by ticking this box here, these are now your personal default settings. And then at the bottom, you would just go ahead and hit submit for the assignment to be created. Okay. Do we have any questions?
Yes, Diva, thank you. For the template, to include the template, I guess it can be useful for the template used for proposals for graduate students who need to check their proposal for their dissertation, or the template for the dissertation itself. You know? So where there is a template for the university name, the faculty itself, the logo, and other issues. So I guess this will be valid.
I don't know if I understand the question. So what is the template in your institution?
Well, there is a where the document template used for proposal for graduate students. Graduate students need to submit a proposal for their dissertation.
Oh.
So there's a where document template where fields that previously filled. So this is common between I guess all students. So
yeah,
that will be valid in our case, and consider it as a template, a Word document template, an empty template.
Yeah. So is the proposal something like where they have to say, I herewith confirm that this is my own personal work?
Maybe something like
no,
that. Maybe one of our professors as a supervisor can elaborate more.
Okay.
Please.
Well, actually, it's like a Word document where there are sections. And
yes, it's a Word file that
titles and have description. And then they fill below the boxes that are below these headings, you know. So these headings are actually the same for each and every student.
Yes.
So these are caught as a similarity whenever we run a file through Turnitin. But it's actually just a template where they're given, you know, instructions on how to fill these boxes.
Yes, it's like a box to be filled.
Yeah.
Boxes to be filled, yes.
Yeah.
And because the proposal is it's almost 2 or 3 pages, and with such a text inside it as a template, it will lead to a large similarity index. When you get the address of the university and let's say the colleges, faculties, and departments, it will give you a large value for the similarity index due to these let's say information about in the template, which is built in part of the template. I think this was the question: how to use disclose this part from the check.
Yeah, perfect. So that template that you share with students that they fill the boxes for, just go ahead and upload that template Okay, so if it is a PDF or like a Word document, I think, Kafta, you said that it is a Word document, isn't it? So that's perfect. Just go ahead and choose that Word document and then open, okay? As long as that Word document is no bigger than 100 MB and has at least 20 words of text, which I suppose it will, judging from what you've just told me, you will be able to upload it here, and then anything submitted to this particular assignment. So students that create those proposals and submit them on this assignment, that will exclude the questions on that proposal. However, for future assignments, that is then not excluded unless you upload it again. Okay, so only for that one assignment where you upload that proposal template to, those questions will be excluded. Okay, perfect. So we then go ahead and hit submit, and then we've created our assignment. This is now giving me the detail on my assignment, not to be confused with the class name. I've now named it all the same. I probably shouldn't have, but this is the class name and this is the assignment name, okay? We've got a paper assignment. This is the start date. This is the due date. And I have the status here where I can see that 0 out of 0 students have submitted. I don't have a student in that class, which is why it says 0 out of 0. Otherwise, it might say something like 0 out of 20, yeah? And then over here, I can view the assignment. Before we go ahead and submit to an assignment, I just really quickly want to show you what happens if you click on Add Assignment again. It basically gives you, for that second assignment that you're now adding, this second window where you have to select your assignment type. It is a bit confusing because there's only one assignment type you can select anyway. So it will just give you paper assignment. You will just have to click next step in order to go to the window that we've just discussed. Okay, so for the first assignment that you create in a class, it does not ask you this second question. For the second assignment that you create in a class, it will ask you to just press next on the paper assignment. So just so that you have seen that, I just wanted to show you. Okay, but now that we have our assignment, if we click on view, this is our assignment inbox where we can see all of the submissions that students have made. Students can just go ahead and submit, or you can actually submit on behalf of a student if you would want to do that. In order to do that, you would click to submit file. And again, you have got this drop down here that we discussed at the start of the session with the quick submit function. If you have enrolled students in the class, you can select the student. Currently, it's only giving me the option to add a submission on behalf of a non-enrolled student. I'm just typing in their first name and last name and their submission title, and then I again can check what I can submit. And I can choose from my computer the file that I want to submit, say open, and then go ahead and say upload. This is now uploading my document, giving me a quick preview, and then I can go ahead and say confirm. And there it is. I can submit another file, or I can go to the assignment inbox, okay? The similarity score will be pending for a moment. I can see the title of the submission. I can see the author or the student. I can see the file, which is something where I can just download the originally submitted file. I can see the paper ID, and just because I haven't mentioned it yet, the paper ID is a way to share a paper with our support team. So if you ever have a technical issue with a paper, that paper ID can be shared with our Turnitin support team, who will be able to look into it for you. And then you also have the date it's been submitted. If you allow late submissions, the date will be highlighted in red for those submissions that will come into the assignment inbox after the due date. Okay, so even though you allow late submissions, you will still see who submitted on time and who didn't. Okay, so far, do we have any questions? Yes, go ahead and ask.
So do we contact the support team through the help tab that we have like at the very right corner at the top?
The help, oh yeah, 1 second. No. So let me just real quick reshare my screen again. 1 sec. So by pressing that help button, let me just 1 second. By pressing help, it opens up our guidance. Okay. So this actually doesn't contact the support team. You would just go ahead and select Turnitin website, and then you have got your role to select, and you've got these different guidances on how to use the system. Okay, the support team is best reached by sending them an email, which I'll put their email address into our chat box. TIIsupport@turnitin.com is their email, and with that email you can go ahead and open a ticket with them. So it's just a case of asking them the questions that you have. Thank you. No worries. Okay, do we have any other questions?
I have a question. What is the difference between standard course and master course?
So the standard course is a course that you work on yourself. With the master course, you have to add a section, and that section you can share with one other member of staff.
Thank you.
No worries. Any more questions? No? Okay. So this would now bring us to the Similarity Report. So now that I have had a submission, Similarity should have generated at some point. It can take up to 10 minutes depending on how busy the server is and how long the document is. But it should provide you with a Similarity Score here. And by clicking on that score, it will open up the Similarity Report, which you can then start interpreting, okay? Before we start interpreting it, just a couple of things about the Similarity Report. So we can see here the name of the student and the title of the submission. On the left-hand side, we have this toggle, which we can use to jump between pages. So if I'm on page 1 and I want to go all the way to page 4, I can just do that by quickly jumping to page 4 like this, okay? Otherwise, I can also scroll, of course, but that takes a bit longer. And I can lock this toggle into place with a little lock at the top here. Okay, so that's that part. At the top here, I can jump between student submissions. So I can just use the arrows to go backwards and forwards, or I can use the drop down. So if I do have more than one submission in my assignments, I should see the name of all of the students here, and I can just jump to their submissions like so, okay? I also have the question mark in this corner here, which we can look up some help articles, like how, for example, to interpret the Similarity Report. At the very bottom, we can see that we can switch to the text-only report. The text-only report is there for accessibility reasons. So it's kind of, it's the same Similarity Report, but it just looks a bit different, not as interactive as this report, okay? You have got the word count and the page count, and you can also switch off high resolution, and you can zoom in and out of the report like so. On the right-hand side, in this little menu here is where we have the majority of our features and functions. So, for example, we've got the information here about the submission, where we can just see what's the student ID, what's the class ID, submission ID, what's the file name, and so on and so forth, okay? We can also download the report. So by pressing this button here where it says download, we can download the current view, which will download the Similarity Report with all the matches being marked in the report. We can download the digital receipt, which is just confirmation that this document has been submitted. And we can also download the originally submitted file, which is just extracting the file out of the system. In our red layer, we then have all of the different parts of the Similarity Report, okay? So starting with this numbered button here, the number always reflects the similarity score. So in my case, that's 28. 28% similarity, and then over here I've got all of my sources that I have been matched with. Okay, so I've got the option here to view English sources. Now the thing is, this is an English paper, so this won't work on this particular paper. However, if you have got papers submitted in a non-English language, then you will be able to click on view English sources better and see the English sources. The idea being that something that has been translated from English into another language can still be matched to the English original source. And that's where you can basically view those English sources. If you don't have this button at the top, it simply means that there has been no matches found to an English source, which is good, okay? What we see in our match overview is then our top sources, so the primary sources of this similarity report. By clicking on a source, the report jumps to the part where the match was found, and it opens up this little overview for me, okay? So in that overview, I can see, of course, the name of the match, which in my case is a match with Investopedia.com, and I can click on that match as well, on that link, to open up the URL, okay? I can see where this is coming from, which source. So this is in that case, which database. This is in that case the internet database. And I can see a match overview where it just highlights in color to me that part that was found to be a match, and also shows me a little bit of the text before and after the match. What I can do as well is I can click on full source view, which opens up the entire contents of that website in my right sidebar. Now with this website, we have a lot of coding that is being shown to me, but if I continue, you can see here, I've now got the entire article that I can read in the right sidebar view. This is quite a useful option or tool for those situations and instances where I might need to pay in order to read an article, or where I might need to register with a website in order to read the articles. Okay, so that's something you can use to bypass that. I can just exit the full source text view with the X again, and then I'm back in my match overview. Now, what I can do as well is I can use the little arrow pointing to the right to view the match breakdown, okay? The match breakdown is basically just showing me that I've got this match here, and I actually have 4 more matches, okay? And I can use the arrows to go backwards and forwards between the different matches. For those 4 matches, my main sources are the ones that I can see here, the one highlighted at the top particularly. I've got a 5% match with that. However, that doesn't mean that parts of this text don't match with other sources as well. And for that, I can see the less relevant matches in this list here. So after Investopedia.com, the next relevant match is this one here, okay? Where I can now see this is a submitted paper. This has been submitted to University of Hertfordshire. Yeah, so I can see, okay, I've got a match with that university here. Just a 4% match, which is why it's not as relevant as the 5% match. And this is basically my match breakdown where I can see the less relevant matches. From here, I can also exclude sources. So if there's any sources that I know I don't need and that I am not interested in, I can press exclude sources and then just select the sources I want to exclude and hit exclude at the bottom. Okay, so that has now excluded my source, which is great. However, if I want to take that resource, the source, back into my report, I can do so by going to this little circle, okay? This little stop sign button is where I can re-include all of my excluded sources. The 2 sources that I have excluded were those 2, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit restore after selecting them. Or I can go ahead and say restore all, okay? Right, going back to the match overview, this is basically the options that I have. I can see how many matches I have, and I can exclude the matches themselves, and of course, view the full text, okay? One thing in regards to the match overview before we move on to the next thing is that I have got the option to see the submissions of other students by requesting this, okay? So if I have, like over here, a match with another student's paper, so outside of my institution, there is a match that was found with my student paper. By clicking on this submitted to Regents College, for example, I can actually send a request to view this paper to that institution. The instructor who has received that original submission is then receiving an email telling them about your match, and they can decide whether they want to release that original paper to you or not, okay? And you can just send the request to view that paper. Okay, back to the Similarity Report. That's the match overview. Sorry, that just real quickly had to refresh. But there's also the All Sources view, which is this button over here. In the All Sources view, I can see every single source that was matched to my paper. So instead of just showing me the most relevant ones, it's just showing me every single one. However, I have to click onto the source in order to actually see the match in the paper, okay? So I don't just get my color-coded report like I did previously. I actually have to click on the source in order to see the match. From here, I can also exclude sources just like I could before. And I can also re-include them just like I could before, okay? Right, we then also have filters. These are the filters that you already know from setting up the assignment. So in the filter button, we can exclude quotes, which if you remember is anything in double quotation marks. We can exclude the bibliography, which as long as we are using the Harvard referencing style is going to exclude just the bibliography of the paper. And then we also have the sources that we can exclude, either by word count or by percentage, or we can choose to not exclude by size. We can switch off the multicolor highlighting, which basically makes the entire report just show in red. And then down here, we would hit apply changes. If we hit new report, it will generate an entirely new report. The only reason why we'd want to do that is so that we check against the database once again. So if we know, for example, that we do have a paper where something has been added to the database that now will produce a match in that paper, we can hit new report. Otherwise, apply changes is going to be sufficient for most of the time. Okay. Right, so that's the functions of the Similarity Report. I'm going to go into the interpretation of the Similarity Report and the flags at the top in a second. I just want to take a quick break again to see if you have any questions.
I have a question about the material generated by AI softwares like ChatGPT. Is it included in a database?
So it's not included in the database in that sense because it's just not available on the internet in that way because it is generated live. There's no way for us to crawl the contents that AI is generating. However, in a month's time, we are releasing a tool in our products, which is the AI detection tool. I can send you some information on that actually as well. 1 second. And basically what it will do is that it will tell you whether something has been written by AI or not. Okay. Now, it is nearly 100% accurate. It's 97% accurate. So it is a great tool. However, I will say that unfortunately, it's only working for submissions made in English. So if your students are submitting papers in the English language, this tool is going to work for you. If they are submitting in a non-English language, then it won't work, unfortunately.
And that's really interesting. So what is that based on? Like, we generate similarity reports by comparing something to a database. So how would we know that something is created by an AI, not by a human? Is there like a certain style that
Yes, yeah, the
Okay.
writing style can be detected because there's quite the difference between a text that is written by a human than a text that is written by a machine. And that difference can be detected and can be highlighted in the text.
Interesting. Thank you.
No worries. I don't know if you have seen it. There is a link in the chat box that I've just pasted in there, which is our AI writing landing page. So you can have a look on previews, like there's a little video that will show you how the AI detection tool is going to look like. It's also talking about the accuracy, like I said, the 97% and so on and so forth. Just please do bear in mind that this will only work for English papers, okay? I work with a lot of German-speaking customers, and it's quite frustrating for me having to say this all the time because I really, really wish it would be available in all of the languages, but unfortunately it will just be the English language to begin with.
Thank you, Professor Hikmet, for addressing this issue. Actually, Turnitin announced this a month ago that there was a webinar. But back to you, Divya, will it be added to all customers for free as a feature, or extra cost will be required?
Very good question. It is going to be added for all customers for free to begin with. However, as the product evolves, that will change. So we don't know any details on that, but to begin with, it is going to be a free feature release.
Great.
Okay, and there's nothing you need to do either. So it's not like you have to enable it on your account. Once it is available, we are releasing it to customers, which is then available to the customer by default. Okay. Any more questions? Okay. I think we can continue then. Right. So now in terms of the interpretation of the Similarity Report. So I just want you to take away that this is a similarity report and not a plagiarism report, okay? So the percentage that we see is not a percentage of what has been plagiarized in the report, it's just a percentage of what is similar in the report. And there will always be some similarity in most papers, and that's perfectly normal and actually good to happen, okay? There's no threshold that I can give you to say that anything above 30-35% is actually too high. That threshold does not exist, and no one should actually create this threshold either. So if within your institution you're saying we accept anything below 30%, that is not a good way of approaching this, okay? We should always take this by a case-by-case basis. The report itself is generated automatically, but the interpretation of the report will always have to happen manually, unfortunately, because it is the human aspect that can distinguish between similarity and plagiarism. Plagiarism is something completely different than similarity, okay? And just to reiterate again, this is a similarity report. So with my report, the way I would go about interpreting it is, of course, going through the bits of similarity step by step, okay? So for example, with number 2 right here, I have got quotation marks and a citation. So this is a perfect case of legitimate similarity, okay? I know this is showing similarity, and it's good that it is showing similarity since it is a quote, yeah? If I have a student that has quoted something and that quote is not producing similarity, and I know for a fact I've not used the exclude quotes filter, then that in itself is actually a bit of a red flag, okay? But in this case, we know where the similarity is coming from. It is a quote, it's perfectly fine. With this next part, we do have quotation marks, but no citation. The reason being, here that the student might have just forgotten to put that in there. The intention of the student is quite clear, as we can see. They have shown me that this is meant to be a quote with the quotation marks, okay? So we can either go ahead and say, actually, we need to make sure everyone is working very well and making sure they include all of their citations, or we just let them off this one time, okay? That's obviously something that you as the instructor would decide, but just noting that this is a citation, this is a quote still, it's just, however, missing the citation. This next paragraph here is a good example of what copy and paste could look like. We have got quite the substantial paragraph showing as a match. If I, as the instructor, know that this is not template material and that this is not like group work that I have asked them to do, then in this case, I would obviously know that this is maybe copy and paste, okay? So, oh, what's happening here? Someone is drawing on my, on my screen. I've not seen that before. Okay, sorry, that distracted me for a second then.
I have a question.
Yeah.
About the color coding. I mean, is there differences between the colors between red and blue and green, or is just colors? I mean, maybe the red one is high similarity, maybe the green is less than that. What do you think? Is there a kind of color coding?
No, there's no reason behind this. It's just sort of like to make it a bit more of a visual to see where a match starts and where the next one starts, where the other one finishes. So it's just to sort of like help interpret the different parts of the report. Okay. Right, so this would then be quite suspicious, looking like copy and paste, okay? As long as I know this is not instructions I've given, no template I've given, no group work and things like that. This next paragraph here is a similar sort of situation. If we look at it in detail, though, we can see that preach in my text has been replaced from infringement. And then we've got is the use or production. In this, we've got is the practice or creation. So some of the words just have been replaced with their synonyms. And that's why these words don't show a similarity, but the paragraph itself still very much is similar and still produces a match, as you can see. So in this case, this would also be considered plagiarism, okay? This next paragraph here is something that we would call mosaic plagiarism, where if we have multiple matches in one paragraph, or they're just like being weaved together, like you can see here, we've got like 2, 15, and 3 and different colors. That's where maybe the students have just puzzled together different parts of different papers to create a new paper, okay? I will say, in reality, this probably doesn't happen very often just because it's a lot of work for them to be doing this, but you might or might not come across this. We then also have these these smaller matches, yeah, as you can see here. Now that can sometimes happen when we have a citation, an indirect quote, yeah, as you can see here. I'm talking about Kent in 2018, and that's why a couple of bits are showing a similarity, because I'm not completely using my own words, but that's normal to happen. Something that can look quite similar to this is the standard wording. So if we have someone just sort of like stating a fact, a very well-known fact, what can happen is that sometimes this fact will produce similarity just because other people have stated a similar fact or have stated that fact in similar words. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is plagiarized. It can just mean that there's just so much content on this particular fact, for example, out there, that it's nearly impossible to write about it without producing a little bit of similarity here and there. One other thing that I want to show you in terms of the interpretation is the references, so the bibliography. I would always recommend to check the bibliography for similarity, because what we're looking for here is actually quite the opposite of what we're looking for everywhere else, and that's a lot of similarity and a lot of different colors. So we want to see the references producing similarity, okay? What we don't want to see is for the references to produce one big chunk of similarity like it does here, okay? So we don't want that to happen. Because what can be the case here is that maybe someone has copied off another student the references, or maybe they have copied the references of an online article and just copied and pasted them over, okay? And that still is plagiarism, even though it is just the references. What we also don't want to see is a reference that does not produce any similarity. Now, in this case, what could happen is that this is a screenshot. To check whether it is a screenshot, we should always see whether we can highlight the text. If we can highlight the text, it's not a screenshot, okay? With a screenshot, we wouldn't be able to highlight the text. So in my case, I can highlight the text, meaning it's not a screenshot, yet the reference still isn't showing similarity. So that can actually mean that the similarity, or sorry, that the reference is not real, that it just doesn't exist, and that's why it doesn't produce similarity, because usually references would produce similarity. This could also be a sign for ChatGPT, actually, because ChatGPT does create references that don't exist, or it actually creates references, mixes them with other references. So sometimes what might happen is that you see a reference where only parts are a match, and that could be the case that this has been created artificially, okay? So I would never exclude the bibliography for those reasons. To go further into the interpretation of the report, we will also have to make sure to check the flags at the top of our report. The flags can be potential signs for text manipulation. The flags also take longer to process than the similarity does. So when we are looking into a new similarity report that has just been generated, sometimes the flags haven't been produced at that stage, okay? It will tell you to come back at a later time. The maximum amount of flags per report is 2. Within those 2 categories of flags, as you can see here, we can have multiple instances. So it's just the 2 types of flags that produces the maximum amount of flags. The 2 types are hidden text and replaced characters. If we go to number 1, hidden text, you can see in my report there's quite a few bits of hidden text. I've got add student name, add student number, and order number, all being keywords for contract cheating, which is ghostwriting. So if someone has ordered with an agency for this report to be written, these sorts of traces can be left behind by them at times. We also have dashes instead of spaces, which the idea is this sentence would now be 1 word rather than 1 sentence. It doesn't work, as you can see, the similarity still will show for this paragraph. We also have wide quotation marks. Now, this is very important because if we do set the filter to exclude quotes, this paragraph wouldn't have shown as similarity, okay? Even though if I just look by myself without the flags, I wouldn't see those quotation marks. So it is quite important to pay attention to the flags. And if I scroll down further, there's also an entire paragraph copied and pasted and the text made white, which is just a copy of this paragraph here. This is just to artificially inflate my word count. I've not said anything new, but I have hit the word count that I had to hit. Okay, so that's the reason for that being here. We then have replaced characters, which is a case of the system checking for characters from another alphabet. Now, in my English example paper, I'm using the Latin alphabet, of course, because the English language is based on the Latin alphabet. However, if I'm using a different alphabet, anything that is found to be the minority outside of that majority used alphabet is going to be shown as a replaced character. So it doesn't just work for the Latin alphabet, it works for any alphabet really. However, with my Latin alphabet, I now have found 6 Cyrillic characters, which kind of don't belong there. If we're using the Latin alphabet, why do we have another alphabet showing? Unless I am using I am writing about a mathematical topic where maybe I'm talking about formulas and equations where I'm using the Greek alphabet, I really wouldn't be expecting to be seeing anything like this, okay? Over here, we can see we've got some E's and R's that have been exchanged. And the idea being, if I replace enough characters, I interrupt the similarity and I don't show, it doesn't show a match. However, our algorithm has identified all of the counterparts and swaps them out as it identifies them. So it will still show the similarity. Sometimes these replaced characters will need to be interpreted. Like I said, if it is a mathematical paper with Greek alphabet, for example, in it, then of course we know that the intention of the student was not to try and prevent plagiarism from showing. With the hidden text, it's a similar sort of situation. Sometimes if a Word document is submitted, and there's a table, specifically tables in Word documents, it can produce hidden text where there is none. Okay, so with a table, it would always show that there's like hidden text behind the table. That's not true. It's just a formatting issue. And then also just bearing in mind that hidden text is considered white text, white text being hidden on a white background. Okay, on a colored background, that white text isn't hidden. So if, for example, you submit a PowerPoint presentation and use white text in contrast to a colorful background, then that white text, of course, isn't hidden. Okay. But yeah, that would be the entire Similarity Report and its interpretation, its features and functions. Do you have any questions at this stage? Okay, seems like we are good to finish. So at this stage, I have got nothing more to show you. That would bring us to the end of this training session. And I'm just going to real quickly sum it all up. So I hope that now that you've had this training session, you understand the features and functions of Originality Check available to you as instructors, that you can use it to identify plagiarism and that you can share those best practices within your institution. There is some resources that I will share with you as part of the recording as well. So the link to the recording and the link to those resources will be sent out to you. There is the Turnitin guides, which you can look up for short sort of like guidance on how to use the product. There's the Turnitin resources page where you can find things like the plagiarism spectrum, our AI writing blog posts and things like that. Which brings us to the next part, the Turnitin blog. We keep our customers up to date on our blog. And there's also the online academy, which is a couple of different little videos that explain the product and go into a little more detail as well. We then also have the contacts that are important for you to note, the Turnitin support, which is TII-support@turnitin.com. The email I've also put into our chat box for any technical support requests. We have got your account manager over here, which is Mo. Mo is available on mbawab@turnitin.com. And then my email address is dlorenz@turnitin.com. Thank you so much for your attention and your good questions and your time. I do have one little favor to ask, and that is basically participating in a quick survey, if you don't mind. I've pasted a link into our chat box once again to a Google document form. If I just real quick share my screen with you, this is what the form looks like. And if you could go ahead and share feedback with me, that would be much, much appreciated. Make sure to select my name and then answer any of those questions in regards to the quality of this training session. If you have any feedback on how we could improve these sessions, that would be very, very valued. So any thoughts you have, please go ahead and
yes, sorry, I missed the first part of the training session. So I have a question: how to log in? Should I use my credential, university credential, and use it to log in? Or it's there on the resources that you will send them? Sorry for that.
You can contact us, Dr. Lawrence.
Okay.
Anytime. I'm the library director. You can contact us. Please feel free to contact us. Though the training will be recorded, it will be shared for all of you. So you will be guided by the recorded training sessions, step by step, how to log in. For the credentials, we will check your account and
okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you so much then. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.